It's weird, and it's also fantastic.
This like video of you just looks like you're nude, just running on the beach.
I am actually. It's
Just nude on the beach, man.
Man, look at that clean-shaven Wicus.
I look like I have this for reference. There we go. Look, there's this especially good one. I think it's at the beginning of this video. That's Grumpa Carrot. This is for the blooper reel, Vo. All right, let's we can work with the specific angles here. So if we go like, what are we gonna call this podcast? GPP. Game Point Performance Podcast. Let's put another P in there too. Game Point Performance Podcast about performance.
About
pastrami.
No. About position.
Yeah.
Proximal position.
GPP.
Yeah, that's it.
Proximal position.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things happening at the same time here because we're very efficient with what we do and we optimize everything about what we do. So we're going to be filming a podcast that also is going to serve as footage for AUDL, Train Like a Pro. Yeah. Train Like Goose, who should probably be the larger video that's being displayed, but instead you have to look at me.
You're welcome.
That's great. You're welcome, everyone. I probably have a better mic than you do, and I have to be the one to share all these cool videos.
You also potentially have a bigger brain. You have a big head.
You have a big head too, man.
It's true. Mine's just not proportional.
Yours is just full of like coffee mocha drinks.
Yeah, that's it.
Donuts. And hopes and dreams. I've just given up all of that and just filled my brain with useless, trivial information about proximal positioning and axial skeletons.
Well, it is full of hopes and dreams. The hopes is coffee. The dreams is donuts.
Yeah, mine is just full of cynicism and, attempts at wit. Yeah, so are we going to do multiple welcomes? Welcome to the Game Point Performance Podcast. Are you going to welcome anyone, Goose, or are you just going to let me be the cordial one?
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, you have the standing ability. I could try to spin in my chair, but I'm going to knock everything off my desk.
Welcome, everyone, to the Game Point Performance Podcast.
Yeah.
This week we're talking about proximal position.
Right. We're going to talk about, because we're definitely not going to film both podcasts back to back today. We might have to go through a wardrobe change for TV magic.
I wear this every day, so
yeah, it's hard to know, really. This could be a Tuesday, this could be a Wednesday. I pretty much only wear Game Point Performance gear.
Yeah, I don't know what today is anyway.
Which you could get from our merchandise section on GamePointPerformance.com. I don't actually know if that's live, so don't hold me to that.
Yeah, it's not yet. But, in some future time, future people will be able to do that.
Yeah, and then people can be like, hey, I have a Game Point Performance jersey from Chris Wicus. He used to play for Johnny Bravo in 2009.
Yeah, actually.
At one point, he did play at an elite level.
We should actually probably do a real introduction, and then I might be the one who needs to introduce you.
Got it.
So maybe you want to put those pencils up.
And we're going to put the pencils up about 6 times because we're going to keep them on track. Colored pencils.
Yeah, keep them up for
10 seconds.
So he can't possibly skip past it.
Right. The only thing is if it's going to record, I think it'll record the video with your video. I'm guessing it's going to record the video with your picture taking up the screen. I'm hoping.
Okay.
You could always stop the video and check, but
yeah. It's our first run. All right. Do we want to do a real introduction now?
clap and bark.
Or yawn, whatever. All right, we'll do it. Welcome to the Game Point Performance Podcast. I'm Goose, or Jonathan Helton, and with us today we have our Director of Performance, Chris Wicus, the big brain of Game Point Performance, and we're going to talk about some concepts that are going to be new to almost everyone listening to this podcast, more likely than not. So, Chris, where are you right now?
I'm in New York City. I'm outside of New York, technically. I'm in Brooklyn.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we are cross-coastal right now. I'm in San Diego. You can tell by all the light coming in and the mild tan.
It's the magic of technology.
Right. Thank you, technology and sun.
Yes.
So the topic for today is going to be proximal position. And those two words sandwiched together are probably not going to resonate with most people initially. So I think we should probably unpack those two words a little bit and get an understanding of why they're important and why we're even bothering talking about it.
Right. So I'd say, like, in the context of Frisbee and field and court sports, most of the time when you're going to hear proximal or position, you're not really going to attribute those to something that is happening in your body. You're probably going to be thinking about, especially with the word position, your defensive or offensive positioning. When we're talking about it, we're referencing that because the model of performance that we're going to use is a movement-based approach. And in order to move properly, we need to be organized in regards to our skeletal position. So if I have to unload and unload through joints to cut and accelerate and decelerate, I need to make sure that the joints involved in deceleration are properly positioned so that I can twist into and out of them. Imagine like me coiling up a spring and then uncoiling it, or imagine me twisting a towel and then untwisting it. Anything that's elastic can be used as kind of analogy for this. And also understanding that this twisting is going to create a higher pressure environment about a joint so that we can release those pressures to go in a different direction. So I guess talk about, like, we're talking about the skeletal position. We need to know a little bit about the skeleton. So let me share my screen here for everyone to see. And we'll start with, when we're talking about proximal position, with proximal meaning towards the center, and position, we're relating position and we're referring to position as bony structures. And then the position of our bony structures in our skeleton is going to dictate how we can use the muscles that are attached to these structures. So proximal, most central segment, that would also be called our axial skeleton. So this is a front to back version of that, where I'm taking into consideration my rib cage, my sacrum, and my cranium in those positions. If those are well positioned, I can make better assumptions that the shoulder blades and the hips are going to be well positioned. And if my pelvic bones and my shoulder blades are well positioned, then I can assume that the femurs, the leg bones, and the humerus, the arm bones, are going to be able to work properly. So, and these things are needed to change directions and jump and cut and throw.
So just to make sure everyone understands proximal, what would be the opposite of that? What would be a term that we would use for the opposite of proximal? What would be an example of it?
So appendicular skeleton, you would call these distal. So these are like anatomical terms that are used in medicine and scientific, anatomy terms. So distal would be everything on the outside. Proximal would be everything in the center.
So your hand would be distal. And
yeah, your hand is distal to your rib cage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, in relation. Okay, so let's go from the side. This is what we were talking about. Again, rib cage, cranium, sacrum. And we want all of these things to be well positioned so that they're in line. And if we have everything in line with this S-curve, cranium, posterior rib cage, sacrum all in one line. And I'm able to utilize, can you see my mouse cursor when I'm doing this?
I can, yeah.
Okay. And I'm able to utilize what's in front. So we'll say abdominals in front. There's a cranium up here, and it's going to be in line with this, and it's going to be in line with this. That's going to position my abdominal muscles, the innermost ones, which are your diaphragm, which is used in breathing and posture, and then the front ones, which are going to help position everything in the center to help me transfer forces, which is another big point for the model of performance that we're going to use. If these things are well positioned, then I have shoulder blades and hips that will allow for the right degrees of freedom and motion at my shoulders and my hip joints. Okay. And the opposite of that, so if I'm in a poorly positioned, ribs are up, back is going to be arched a little bit. You can see that better in this position. So people with tight backs and tight hamstrings, a lot of that is going to come from the position of the pelvis and the rib cage. So if a hamstring attaches here, the bottom of my pelvis, and my pelvis is always in a tip forward position and my center of mass is forwards, I'm going to have ribs that stick out and a chest that sticks out, shoulders that are back, a head that is forwards. Let's see if I have a better position. A head that goes forwards. And then that is actually going to change the position of my scapulas and my pelvic bones. You can see a little bit different. These kind of hug the back of the rib cage is supposed to be round based on the position, proximal stability or proximal positioning like we're talking about. If everything is right and organized from here, as you go from the most proximal area to the more distal areas, which are outside of that central line, you're going to have different positioning of the scapulas and the pelvic bones.
So in a real human, we would commonly be able to see someone look like they may have good posture with their back. Just, they've got the classic like flat back appearance, but it could be, in fact, poor posture and eliminate. Okay.
And I think the pendulum swings both ways when it comes to trying to fix the perceived problems of the world. And posture for a very long time there was this perception that me having a more slouched position is bad. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily, from what I know and what our model of performance would indicate, is that's not the whole truth. So what I want to be able to be upright, but I don't want to sacrifice my proximal position. So I don't want to sacrifice the position here in order to try to stiffen myself up straight. Because what's going to happen there is I'm going to end up sacrificing the position of my abdominal muscles, which is then going to it's going to exacerbate these tight hamstrings and tight low back that so many people experience, especially athletes. So once I've managed, yes, and you're the perfect example of this because you're someone who is very fit and had a muscular system with a lot of endurance, but there would always seem to be a point of diminishing returns for your low back, and your back would seize up, and you would need to get that fixed. And that, if you understand this concept that we're trying to convey, if your abdominal muscles are not acting in coordination with your lower back muscles, then you end up overusing. And you can see like how swollen this is and how it kind of looks kinked. And that's this is a good model for how it happens. If we don't have congruency between the rib cage, which has its own diaphragm that you use for respiration and use your lungs, and your pelvic diaphragm, which is the muscle floor, your pelvic floor that rests in your pelvis, if that, along with the front of your abdominals, are not well positioned, then you do have to rely on using your low back and your hamstrings for a lot of work. So we're trying to return people to a resting state that's going to provide for, more efficiency to move from. It's going to allow for better transfer of forces from the ground through the upper body, which is the show when it comes to athletics on the fields and field and court. And it's going to help me position my joints so that there's less wear and tear. Okay. What does this look like? So I'm just talking through these things and trying to explain concepts. It's probably going to be better for everyone to see how we try to achieve these positions that get lost on a lot of our athletes, and how we layer the context of these drills in order to help integrate them into what we do on the field. So let's look at, now that we have this concept of what proximal position should look like when we're talking about our abdominals and our back and our cranium, our posterior rib cage and our sacrum, we're going to talk about Goose here in the example of, or using one of our warm-ups from our program. You can see the position of Goose's head, his posterior rib cage, and his sacrum along the ground. He's also pretty sucked to the floor. So he's using the floor right now as a reference point for his abdominal wall. So everything that wraps around, like imagine a big canister, top of the canister. Let me see if I can actually draw this, use this cool little thing we got here. So we'll say top of the canister is going to be, red is so aggressive. Let's not do red. We want to be on brand. We got to stay on brand. Let me move to, this is better. All right. Game Point Performance. Here at Game Point Performance, we like to stay on brand. Where is...
We'd like to thank our sponsors.
Yeah.
GamePointPerformance.com.
So here is his thoracic diaphragm, or the respiratory diaphragm. His pelvis and his pelvic diaphragm are going to be here. It's probably not exactly the position, but whatever. And that is being, the position of his pelvis right now is being aided by using his heels, which we'll talk about a lot in our program, and his hamstrings to help reposition his pelvis right here. So that puts the bottom of this core that we're talking about. When people talk about their core, this is what they actually mean. They don't just use these things as, catchwords, want more Instagram followers, because we do core training. So here's that unit of the core. We got the front of the abdominals, especially concerned about these lateral abdominals, those oblique muscles. Back is sucked to the floor so I don't get a huge arch, and I'm not lengthening the abs in front so I lose control of them. So right here, we're getting this position well. So we talked about this already. Here, here, here. All in good line. We know his axial position is good. If he breathes to this position, he can help integrate that into his movement, because he'll be using these abs in their coordinated fashion, how they're designed to work with the diaphragms. And then we can progress to, let's move on to this. Okay. All right. So add in another layer to this, just so that when we get to our example of sprinting, you can see what we're talking about here. So we want to pay attention to the line. Goose is reaching right now, which will also help reinforce that position. So as he reaches his rib cage, if it was forwards before, say it was forwards because he was arching his back and his chest was coming forwards here. Him reaching helps push his back to the floor so that, again, I can stay here, here, and here, all in line. This position, if I'm able to hold it through actions like going through ranges of motion, I'm going to position my shoulder blades well and my pelvic bones well. And this reach is also going to be coordinated with a lot of things that we find in athletic action, such as skipping. Is this getting too busy yet?
There's a lot of blue.
There's a lot of blue. It's on brand, even though I don't think the color is.
It's not quite right. That's okay.
I mean, I think like that looks way better.
Yeah.
And we probably should point out
your frown,
how sad I am. And then you can just, if we're gonna stay, grumpy cat.
Grumpy cat. Yeah, that's
hold on. Let's yeah.
And Wicus face.
Yeah. There's plenty of pictures that were attempted to be taken on the website that look like that. Let's see, grumpy cat. Where's
There definitely have to be more.
This is important. All right, and especially I think if everyone can see there we go. That's the real money right there.
Yeah.
And There we go. Grumpy cat. Cool. So what was I talking about, Goose? Because that was an important segue into something.
Well, we were just talking about reaching and how we commonly see that in things like skipping or some of these joint angles.
Great. So we'll talk about, I will get to that, but I remember to kind of referring to layering context. So getting a large part of what we do here at Game Point Performance is get you to own your athleticism. So to us, that means we want you to be able to access positions that are valuable for sporting action, but we also want you to be able to feel them. So in order to really own your position, you should be able to feel what it feels like to get into and out of these loading and unloading positions of these joints. And in order to do that, it's very helpful to be able to feel these muscles that we use with proximal positioning in order to do that. So now that we've brought an awareness for the athlete to heels, hamstrings, abs, which are things that will just be so reiterated throughout the course of your time training with us that you might get sick of it. And you might have nightmares of me or Goose or Kayla or anyone part of our wonderful staff here at GPP telling you to feel your heels, hamstrings, and abs. Okay, so let's relate. Let me get this first. Here we go. So in this video, which I'll just use how do I clear this? Annotate. Go away. Maybe I can just.
Look at that eraser work. It's better than the old chalkboard.
Yeah, and you don't have to you just have to click on the one position. You don't have to. Science. Okay. So we're going to take what we were just talking about. Just imagine this is an inverted version of what Goose was just doing. His wonderful wife is showing us this position. So heels, we can't feel heels as much in this position because this is our kneeling all fours position. So that's why we utilize that back position first, because then I can use that position with her heels on the box to help turn these on, bring awareness to that, which will help position the pelvis here. Okay, so from there, I'm doing a reach. I'm using the gravity in the ground to help get me into a position that will be beneficial for us in the same ways that we were just talking about. So let me get to. Nobody wants to hear me talk right now because they're already doing that. It's too much. Okay. So reaching, just coming forward a little bit, still feeling those. Exhale and reach, help position our abs. So this is just a way to reinforce that position that we're talking about. Once she gets into this position, it's going to be helpful to have her head come up a little bit. But for the case of this video, really trying to get her to feel abs and be able to breathe posteriorly and get air to go all the way around. Okay. So we'll move on from this.
And again, much of the point there is to get the rib cage down, right?
Yes.
Tucked away.
I want to use my abdominals in a way that's going to be able to allow for this expansion when I breathe to happen all the way around. So if I imagine this core that it's so referred to, pelvic floor on the bottom, diaphragm on the top, you have transverse abdominis and all these other muscles that wrap around the outside of it. I want to be able to breathe into everything, what you would call circumferentially or in all directions equally. Okay. If not, you get like funky looking stuff like this, where you get breath to go up and out, you get ribs to flare, you get a pelvis to dump forwards, and then you end up in a broken position that doesn't really will not lead to a well-positioned proximal unit or axial skeleton. Okay, so anyways, we've done 2 breathing exercises. And now we're going to layer that on top of something that's a little more complex and loaded. So Kayla is going to take everything that she just developed from the floor. which again, if she's in this position,
looks very familiar.
looks very familiar. And why might that be? Because if her arms were to go straight out from this position along the line of this bar, which have now become like her arms basically, we have all of these same type of positions that we were dealing with before. So what we've done is we've taken the ground-based position. We've taken the reference points from that and the abdominals from that, and we've brought it up to a taller position, very much like how a child would learn to walk. And then we get to a point where we're using our standing exercises and we're transitioning all of those things into more complicated and integrated movements. Okay, so heels, hamstrings are in a good position because we started in a good position. Abs are on. Everything, all this force that's coming from the ground is going to be transferred very well through a skeleton that's in this position. Joints are going to be in good positions because of that as well. And this is going to provide longevity. This is going to be able to get you to be able to cut into and out of your hips, be able to sequence throwing from your hips through your core out to your arms. All of these things that need to happen from side to side with your pelvis and your rib cage, because those things are going to move together. And if they're not able to move together and they are stuck in this broken position, you end up having to kind of sway side to side. And that's not efficient, and that will end up with you having to overuse hamstrings, Achilles, low backs, knees, all sorts of normal overuse injuries. So it's kind of like, why is that happening to begin with? Okay. So then we got from there, let's look at a video of our man Goose doing some running. So how does this relate to running around? Like how would squatting relate to running on the field? This is more of a question for everyone and not necessarily Goose, who is not answering, but that's okay.
I thought about answering, but then no one else would answer.
Yeah, just let everyone else in the class have a chance.
That's right.
So we're gonna see a lot of familiar things happening here. Again, we have that's okay. All right, doesn't like the full screen for that, so we'll go.
We're drawing.
We're drawing. There we go. That's a pretty terrible line. We'll give us another shot here. Let the computer do it for me here. Head, sacrum, rib cage. Reach. So these angles are going to be very similar to what it looked like when we were warming up and we had our heels on a box. So these concepts layered in this way will hopefully help explain to everyone why we do these seemingly like esoteric drills. Like why are these things being used? Like it just seems like you're laying on the ground and breathing like a cat.
Right.
But what you're really doing is you're prepping yourself from the ground up in ways that are what we would call self-limiting in order to layer context on top of other things so that we can do it on the ground, which is a lot easier because you have reference from the floor. You have less gravity to have to manage because you're on the ground. And then you can do it in a more upright position. So if we're on all fours, then we try to do it when we're in half kneeling exercises that you'll see as part of the program. And then standing drills, we apply all of these things to our dynamic warm-up so that once we get to full speed, we're able to achieve these positions at max velocity and get the most bang for our buck. I guess that's the long and the short of it. It's pretty long at this point. I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I'm sure everyone is absolutely engaged and as enthralled as I am about all this stuff. What is that? Is that a battleship in the background?
Yeah, it is.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, Coronado.
Yeah. Goose, do you like living on the beach?
Beach is the best.
Yeah, no one would even know that you lived on a beach, right?
I mean, I'm here naked running on the beach.
Yeah. It looks like you're nude, pretty much. So let me get this out of the way. Let's see, people can see you run in slow-mo. Okay. You can go even slower mo because I can drag this thing. See this slowly getting to those positions, staying tall. He's keeping his abs on, which allows for a lot of great things to happen, which we'll talk about in the next episode. We talk about high intensity and low intensity, and we specifically break down tempo running. Look at that. Just look at Goose's, like, look at your hips. They're just flying right along that line where the ocean meets the sand. It's a beautiful thing, man. Your head's right on the horizon, stays tall up there.
I feel like I should have recorded what the before looked like.
Yeah.
The way I ran before I understood concepts.
Just firing out behind you.
Yeah, just feet staying behind my torso the whole time. Like they're on a wheel back there. And with my rib cage super flared. And part of the problem with that position for ultimate players who are listening is you're in an extended position. You can't extend anymore. So if you're running like that and you need to lay out for the disc to get a block or to catch it, nothing really happens. You're just your orientation to the ground. There's no ability to explode forward. You are as extended as you can be. If you are nicely positioned, like in this video, there's still room for extension. There's still room to create a more explosive moment.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring up. I am by no means saying that extension is bad. And I think a lot of what we're trying to myth bust or talk about when we talk about common fallacies of fitness or whatever you want to say, nothing is definitive. Everything works in a very dynamic and coordinated fashion. The human body is very dynamic, but we can kind of guess based on principles and how the body functions that in a relative sense, I'm going to need certain joint angles and positions in order to output what I want, especially if I'm talking about running and sprinting. So like what you're saying is very true. If I was to be in that broken and extended state, the only option that I have to go faster is going to be to reach front of my body more and to push back behind my body more, which will then make me drop my hip height, lose the position of my abdominals, really rely on my hamstrings and my low back to keep me just firing force back into the ground. When in this example of you running full speed, you're very tall, and you can see the motion that's actually driving you forward is this last little bit of where you're pushing here, and your hamstring and your hip extenders are bringing you to your next leg. So that's an important thing that we'll talk about in our next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, for right now, like I just want everyone watching this to be able to see these positions, how they relate. So say sprinting, which is our, the pinnacle of our display of our athleticism. And it's the number one thing that's going to make you a good athlete. There's all these different parts of what we do, but such a high percentage of what we do as field and court athletes and ultimate players is sprint and to run. So if you can't have a training program like ours that breaks down all of these components and constituent parts to allow you to produce efficient and forceful gait, which is sprinting, then you're spinning your wheels. You're going to get strong and you're going to train for the sake of training. That's not going to transfer to what you're doing on the field. and you really are wasting your time, in my opinion, and the opinion of the rest of us here at Game Point Performance.
True story.
True story. Cool. So that's, I think we covered, was there any other things that we needed to cover?
No, that's it for today.
We'll post this for everyone. If you're part of our community, please leave us some questions on the forum, which we'll put some link information to after this. Please sign up at gamepointperformance.com/join, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. Right now, let's see, today's date is May 15th. We currently are not live with the site, but we are extending invitations to people as they submit their emails. And next month, people who are watching this can just go ahead and sign up.
Cool.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you for your time. Hopefully everyone who's watched this has just had their mind blown.
Or they have no idea what I was just talking about.
Or
I promise
they get lost at the word distal and proximal.
I'm not making up, I can promise that at least 30% of what I said is not made up.
Yes. Neither is that percentage.
Am I kidding? Who knows?
No one does.
Yeah.
Not the cat. All right.
All right. Stopping video now. Have fun editing this, Vo. Hugs and kisses.